Kevin and Charlie were the same height the first day Kevin arrived in his suite. This made it easy for Charlie to lick every part of Kevin's face as soon as he entered the door. Kevin laughed, and everyone joined in when they realized that Charlie had backed Kevin into the corner of the kitchen. Rita rubbed Charlie's back, and he moved away from Kevin's face. Rita told Kevin that Charlie was his new best friend and handed him Charlie's leash. Ava added that there was no way to truly verify if this was the case. Tony smiled at Kevin and shrugged his shoulders. Kevin grabbed the leash and rubbed Charlie's back. He smiled at Charlie and at everyone. Everyone continued to smile and laugh. Tony gave Kevin a name tag to place on his shirt, which read, Kevin. Rita pointed to his name tag and read it aloud. She pointed at the name tags on everyone else and read them aloud too. Everyone toured Kevin through his suite. From the door off the backyard, they entered the kitchen, with its long countertop along the back wall and the windows facing the backyard. The large table in the middle of the kitchen had 5 chairs. A chalkboard fastened to the wall had, "Welcome to your suite, Kevin," written on it. Ava read the phrase to Kevin while Tony pulled out a notebook and started writing. They pointed to the camera in the corner of the ceiling, and everyone waved at it. The great room off the kitchen had several couches and chairs, a bed on the floor for Charlie, bookshelves covering the entire back wall, and another camera and chalkboard. The table between the fireplace and the piano had 4 monitors on it. They explained that each monitor was currently displaying the 4 exterior walls of the house. Down the hall towards the front of the house, they entered the washroom, and Rita pointed out how there were no cameras. Charlie walked up to the toilet, turned around, and sat down on the seat. Everyone turned around to face away from Charlie, and after a moment, Kevin did the same. When Charlie began to walk off the toilet, everyone looked to see what he had done and found yellow liquids and brown solids. Tony waved his hand over his face to signal a foul odor, and Charlie used his paw to flush the toilet. Everyone clapped and cheered. Kevin started to pull down his pants, and everyone left the washroom. Kevin sat on the toilet and laughed as Charlie licked his face. Kevin finished and asked everyone to look. He flushed the toilet like Charlie, and everyone cheered. Tony wrote in his notebook. Further down the hall, at the front of the house, was Kevin's bedroom. Ava showed Kevin his bed, desk, dresser, and closet. There was another bed on the floor for his best friend. His desk had 5 monitors and a camera. They showed Kevin the monitors and explained that the 3 labeled with their names were displaying each of their suites upstairs. Kevin looked at the 3 monitors and saw empty suites with beds and dressers similar to his. They explained that the 3 suites were displaying Kevin's bedroom on their monitors as well. Tony pressed the keys of the keyboard and pointed to the letters appearing on the monitor labeled Group Chat. Kevin sat on his desk chair, spelled his name with the keyboard, and laughed when he saw his name on the monitor. The last monitor on the desk was displaying the backyard and the door to Kevin's suite. Tony pressed a button on the monitor, and another side of the house's exterior appeared. Kevin continued to press the same button, changing through all the exterior and interior cameras until he returned to the first backyard camera. Kevin smiled when he recognized the backyard again, and everyone smiled too. They opened Kevin's bag and transferred his clothes and belongings into their proper places. They opened the door next to Kevin's bedroom, leading out to the front yard of the house. They explained and demonstrated how the door could only be opened from the inside and only in case of an emergency. They made their way out of Kevin's suite and into the backyard. After the door was shut, Tony began to place a lock on it. Rita did the same, and then Ava. They handed a key and lock to Kevin and explained that everyone had their own key and lock that they place on Kevin's door whenever they leave. Kevin tested his key in his lock, attached his lock to the door, and placed his key around his neck like everyone else. Tony pointed out the camera on the back wall of the house, and Kevin nodded and smiled. They proceeded through the door located right next to Kevin's, up the flight of stairs, and came upon 3 locked doors. Ava opened the first door with her key and let everyone inside. The suite was just as Kevin had seen on the monitor in his room. The layout was similar to that in his bedroom, but with an additional washroom and kitchenette. Ava pointed out the camera on her desk and the monitor labeled Kevin, which was displaying Kevin's bedroom. The other monitors showed the suites of Rita and Tony and the backyard. Ava pressed the button on the backyard monitor and showed Kevin that it operated just like his. Kevin looked at her group chat monitor and laughed when he saw his name typed out. Ava typed her name on the monitor and everyone laughed. They proceeded through the next locked door, opened by Rita, which revealed a room very similar to Ava's. Kevin could hear Ava talking over the speakers on the desk and turned to see her waving on her monitor. Kevin waved to Ava and laughed. Ava locked her suite and so did Rita. Tony opened the last door and they all proceeded up another flight of stairs to his suite, which was similar to Ava's and Rita's. They looked out the windows at the neighborhood and then returned to the backyard. Their house was located at the end of a bay of houses. The backyard fanned out from the house and was completely surrounded by a tall wooden fence. There was a workshop in one corner, a garden in the other, and a large open grass space in between, complete with a fire pit. As they entered the backyard, Charlie ran and pulled Kevin along with him. Kevin let go of the leash as he fell over onto the grass and began to cry. Before Rita and Ava reached Kevin, Tony started to whistle. As Charlie raced over to Tony, he leaned over and Charlie jumped up onto his back and then jumped high into the air. Tony clapped. Kevin saw the jump and began to laugh over his tears. He stood back up and ran over to Charlie, and Charlie licked his face. Tony kept whistling, and Charlie kept running around the backyard. He sounded a different whistle, and Charlie sat still. Another whistle, and Charlie rolled over. Kevin laughed and started moving around like Charlie. Tony grabbed a ball off the grass and threw it to the other side of the backyard. Charlie retrieved the ball and brought it back to Tony. Tony grabbed the ball from Charlie and handed it to Kevin. Kevin threw the ball and Charlie brought it back. Kevin laughed and everyone cheered. The best friends continued to play and Tony wrote in his notebook. Rita invited everyone over to the garden. She walked Kevin over to the line of carrots, pulled one out, cleaned off the soil, and took a bite. Kevin watched and laughed as Rita chewed and made sounds of enjoyment. Kevin pulled out another carrot, and Ava and Tony did the same. Rita felt that Kevin had not cleaned enough soil off his carrot and compared their 2 carrots. When Kevin finished cleaning his, Charlie bit off half. Everyone laughed as they watched Charlie eat. Kevin took a bite from his remaining carrot and made sounds of enjoyment like Rita. When Charlie was done his bite, he came over to Kevin and licked his face. Everyone laughed. Ava walked over to the swing that was hanging from a tree near the fence in the middle of the backyard. Charlie followed her, and Kevin followed Charlie. Ava started to swing back and forth, moving her legs and shifting her body, while Charlie chased her back and forth. She got off the swing and offered it to Kevin. He climbed on and began to move his legs and body like Ava, but was unable to swing like she did. Kevin asked for a push from Ava, and she insisted that he continue to move his legs and body like she had. Kevin continued to move and slowly gained enough momentum, and everyone cheered. Kevin was swinging well and laughed as he watched Charlie chase him. When Kevin finished swinging, Tony walked over to the workshop. Charlie followed Tony, and everyone followed him. The workshop was filled with tools and machines for wood, metal, and clothing construction. There was a bookshelf, a chalkboard, pencils and paper, monitors, and a camera. The wall facing the backyard was lined with windows and a countertop similar to Kevin's kitchen. Tony pulled a piece of glowing metal that was in the stove and held it in front of everyone. He looked at Kevin, hovered his other hand close to the glow, and pulled it away quickly. They explained to Kevin that the glow was too hot to touch. Kevin's eyes grew wide, focusing on the glow, and he slowly held out his hand next to it. He felt the heat off the glow and pulled his hand back quickly like Tony did. Everyone laughed, Charlie whined, and Rita and Kevin rubbed his back. They left the workshop and walked to the side of the house where there was another door with 4 locks on it. Everyone opened a lock and proceeded down the flight of stairs. On one side of the basement, there were storage boxes, clothes washing machines, and large containers of water. Tony grabbed 4 glasses, filled them, and handed one to everyone. He used his glass to fill a bowl on the ground for Charlie. Kevin saw this and poured some of his water into the bowl too. Everyone smiled and nodded at Kevin as Charlie drank his water. The other half of the basement had a freezer and cold storage shelving with many full and empty jars. Rita opened a jar of carrots and made sounds of enjoyment like she did in the garden. As everyone took turns eating the carrots, Kevin handed one to Charlie and rubbed his back as he ate. Rita grabbed a pie from the freezer, and they headed back up the stairs and locked the door. They made their way back into Kevin's suite and placed their locks on the inside of the door. Tony grabbed the jug of water on the table and filled everyone's glass and Charlie's bowl. Ava went to the great room and started playing a record of music on the sound system. Rita put the pie in the oven, pulled out the utensils, and joined everyone at the table. Kevin and Charlie's chairs were against the far wall where they could view everything in the kitchen and great room. Tony sat across from them, Ava in front of the chalkboard, and Rita closest to the kitchen countertop. Kevin was admiring Charlie and rubbing his back, and everyone else sat and admired the 2 best friends. The smell of pie filled the kitchen. Kevin and Charlie watched as Rita pulled the pie from the oven and served everyone a piece. Charlie ate his piece before anyone else had started, and everyone laughed. Tony took the first bite from his piece and made loud sounds of enjoyment, tilting his head back, closing his eyes, and gave Rita 2 thumbs up. Kevin watched and laughed. Ava took a bite and enjoyed it as well, making a different sound, closing her eyes, and nodding her head. Rita enjoyed her piece too, and everyone watched Kevin as he started to eat. He made his own unique sounds of enjoyment, and everyone laughed. Ava asked Kevin if he liked the pie, and he nodded and gave Rita 2 thumbs up. Tony clapped and everyone smiled. When the pie was done, everyone went to the sink with their utensils and took turns cleaning. Kevin made use of the stepping stool to access the sink, and everyone cheered when he was finished. On the kitchen table was a jug of water, a bowl of fruit, a bowl of mixed nuts, a vase of flowers, a dictionary, pencils, and paper. Ava picked up some paper, colorful pencils, and began to draw. Rita grabbed a cookbook from the bookshelves and began to read. Tony wrote in his notebook. Kevin stood up on his chair, leaning over the table to see what everyone was doing. Charlie did the same. They both sat back down, and Kevin continued to watch everyone and rub Charlie's back. As time passed, Kevin asked Ava what she was doing. She picked up her paper and showed everyone a portrait of Kevin and Charlie sitting at the table. Rita smiled and nodded, and Tony clapped and gave a thumbs up. Ava handed Kevin the drawing and started drawing on a new piece of paper. Kevin studied the portrait closer and laughed and showed the portrait to Charlie. Ava picked up the box of colorful pencils she was using and placed them in between her and Kevin. Kevin grabbed one of the pencils and began to add color to the portrait. After applying a few more colors, Kevin presented the updated portrait to everyone. Rita smiled and nodded, Tony clapped and held 2 thumbs up, and Ava said it was better than before. Ava picked up her new drawing, and it was a portrait of Rita reading the cookbook. Rita said she liked it, Tony smiled and clapped, Kevin clapped too, and everyone laughed. Ava took her new portrait and fastened it to the wall behind Kevin, and Kevin fastened his updated portrait as well. Kevin asked Rita what she was doing, and Rita explained that she was looking for a new recipe in the cookbook. She set the book on the table in between her and Kevin and pointed at a picture of a pie on the page. She pointed at the first item on the list, then got up and grabbed it from the pantry. She pointed at the word on the page and said, "flour," and then pointed at the word on the container and said, "flour." Ava erased everything on the chalkboard and started writing and repeating what Rita said. Rita pointed at the measurement in the book and grabbed the measuring utensils to retrieve the flour and place it in a bowl. She counted the scoops, Ava wrote and read them again, and Kevin repeated everything they said. Rita brought the remaining ingredients over, and Kevin measured and added each one. Each time, Kevin repeated the instructions. Rita proceeded to read out the directions of the recipe, and Ava kept writing, reading, and drawing on the chalkboard. Tony kept cheering, helping where he could, and periodically wrote in his notebook. Charlie stood right next to Kevin and watched everything. Kevin and Rita placed the dough in pie trays and began filling them with different ingredients. When they completed the first pie, Rita directed Kevin to the oven and showed him how to turn it on. Ava read back the items written on the chalkboard, and Rita and Kevin joined in. Everyone cleaned up the utensils and ingredients. The smell of pie began to fill the kitchen once again, and Rita called Kevin over to remove the pie from the oven. They each put on mitts, and with Kevin in front of her, Rita held her hands over Kevin's and guided his to grab the pie. Kevin's eyes grew wide in concentration as they slowly moved the pie from the oven over to the kitchen table. When they set the pie on the table, Kevin cheered and everyone joined in. Charlie began to pace around, shaking his tail and howling, and Kevin rubbed his back. Rita showed Kevin how to cut and serve the pie. Tony grabbed the water jug to fill everyone's glass and Charlie's bowl. Charlie ate his piece before anyone started theirs, and everyone laughed. Tony took the first bite of his piece and made very loud sounds of enjoyment, rubbing his stomach, licking his lips, and gave Kevin 2 thumbs up. Kevin laughed. Rita and Ava also made sounds of enjoyment and nodded their heads in agreement at Kevin. Ava told Kevin that the pie was excellent, and Rita admitted the pie was better than hers. Kevin smiled and enjoyed his pie too. After everyone finished cleaning their dishes, they returned back to the table to snack on fruits and nuts and drink water. Ava continued to draw, Rita continued to read, and Tony continued to write in his notebook. Kevin watched Tony and asked what he was doing. Tony handed his notebook to Ava, and she placed it in between her and Kevin. Pointing at each word, she began to read the events that transpired since Kevin entered his suite that day. Kevin laughed when he realized what Tony had wrote. As Ava continued reading through Tony's notebook, Kevin and Tony gave each other thumbs up, and everyone laughed. Ava grabbed another notebook from the bookshelves and handed it to Kevin. Rita pointed to Tony's notebook cover, which had Tony written on it. She pointed to the same spot on Kevin's notebook and said, "Kevin." Kevin laughed, grabbed a pencil, and wrote his name on the notebook. Kevin turned to the first page of his notebook and began to draw everyone, writing their names above each of their heads. He showed everyone when he was done, and everyone admired his drawing. Tony got up and filled 5 bottles full of water. He passed them out and signaled for everyone to follow him out to the backyard. Charlie ran out the door as everyone fastened their locks. They made their way over to the middle of the backyard where they formed a circle, faced each other, and started to stretch. Kevin watched everyone and then started to follow along, doing the same stretches everyone was doing. Everyone was making sounds of enjoyment during certain stretches. Kevin did the same, and everyone laughed. Tony handed Charlie's leash to Kevin and showed him how to attach it to Charlie's collar. They headed through the back gate in the fence and entered the park behind the house. Kevin was holding onto Charlie's leash, and after Tony whistled, everyone started to jog together around the perimeter of the park. Charlie stopped jogging to sniff the ground, and everyone stopped to drink from their bottles. Kevin rubbed Charlie's back and smiled at everyone, and everyone smiled back. When Charlie stopped sniffing or Tony whistled, everyone began jogging again. They continued jogging around the park until they returned to their back gate. Tony wrote in his notebook. They entered the backyard, and Tony showed Kevin how to remove the leash. Charlie ran around, and everyone made their way to the middle of the backyard to stretch again. After stretching, they all sat on the ground, closed their eyes, and remained there in silence. Charlie sat by Kevin as he watched everyone else with their eyes closed. After some time, Kevin asked them what they were doing, and everyone laughed and smiled. They all got up without saying anything. Tony grabbed pieces of wood from a pile by the workshop and set them in the fire pit. Ava brought over a portable stereo from the workshop, and Rita collected some tomatoes and cucumbers from the garden. Tony signaled for Kevin to join him at the fire pit. He made a small pile of wood and began hitting 2 stones together to make sparks. Kevin saw the sparks, and his eyes and smile grew wide. Tony kept making sparks until he started the wood on fire, and then blew out the flames. Tony and Kevin laughed, and everyone joined in. He handed the stones to Kevin to try, and after several failed attempts, he finally started the small pile on fire. Charlie jumped back and barked, and everyone cheered. Tony placed the burning pile into the fire pit, and the larger pieces of wood began to burn. Everyone cheered, and Tony wrote in his notebook. Ava turned on the stereo, and everyone started dancing around the fire. Kevin watched and laughed as everyone danced with the music. Kevin was jumping up and down and clapping in time with the music. Everyone did the same. Kevin started to laugh, and everyone laughed too. Charlie barked and jumped around. The song changed, and Ava started to dance with different moves, in time with the music. Rita made sounds of enjoyment, Tony whistled and cheered, and Kevin tried to do the same. Ava kept playing different songs and demonstrating various styles of dance while everyone tried following along. After a while, they all decided to take a break. Rita started to eat some of the vegetables and offered them to everyone. They all rested around the fire as the stars appeared in the sky. As they relaxed around the fire, Charlie yawned, and then Kevin, and then Tony. Everyone laughed. Tony showed Kevin how to extinguish the fire, and everyone returned to Kevin's suite. Charlie entered first and ran directly to the washroom. Everyone sat around the kitchen table and waited for their turn. Once everyone had their turn on the toilet, they all made their way into the washroom. They handed the container of floss around, and everyone stood in front of the large mirror and flossed their teeth. They showed Kevin how to wrap the floss around his fingers and place it in between his teeth. Then everyone grabbed a toothbrush from the shelf and brushed their teeth. Tony grabbed a different toothbrush and began to brush Charlie's teeth. Kevin laughed, and Tony handed him the brush to try. Charlie licked Kevin's hands and face as he brushed his teeth, and everyone laughed. Tony took off his shoes and socks and stepped into the shower. He shut the door, which obscured everything from his shins to his shoulders. Everyone watched as he removed his shirt, shorts, and underwear and placed them on top of the door. Tony turned on the shower, and everyone laughed as he made sounds of enjoyment. Tony showed everyone the bar of soap in his hand and started to rub it on his body. Ava and Rita began to follow Tony's actions and say the body parts he was cleaning as they moved along. Kevin joined in, and Charlie walked up to the shower to look under the door. Everyone laughed as they called Charlie away from the shower. When Tony had finished, he shut off the shower, grabbed the towel from the door, and dried himself off. Rita then handed him one of the bathrobes that were hanging next to the shower. Tony put on the robe, exited the shower, everyone cheered, and Charlie barked. Rita and Ava then proceeded to take turns showering, following the same sequence. They retrieved some clean clothes from Kevin's room, and then everyone joined Kevin at the shower to show him how to adjust the temperature. He took off his shoes and socks and then stepped into the shower and closed the door. Kevin removed his clothes and placed them under the door where Charlie was looking and began to shower. Kevin could not see which body parts Rita and Ava were calling out to wash and opened the door. Everyone laughed and turned to face the other direction. Kevin said he wanted to make sure he was showering correctly. With their backs to Kevin, everyone demonstrated and called out the body parts they were cleaning, and Kevin followed along. When they were done, Kevin shut the door, turned off the shower, and dried himself off. Rita handed the clean clothes to Kevin under the door, and he exited the shower when he was dressed. Everyone cheered, and Tony wrote in his notebook. Everyone went to the kitchen, and Ava explained that they were going to their suites to prepare to go to sleep for the night, and that they would be back in his suite the following morning. Rita explained that when they exit Kevin's suite and the door is closed, they will place their 3 locks on the outside of the door, and Kevin will place his lock back on the inside. Then Kevin and Charlie should go to the bedroom and wait to see everyone on the monitors. Kevin agreed, and they left the suite, locking the door as explained. Rita called through the door to Kevin to see if he had placed his lock on the door, and he confirmed he had done so. They headed up the stairs and into their respective suites. Everyone was sitting at their desks and could see everyone else. Kevin waved at everyone and laughed, and everyone did the same. Tony began to type out the notes he had written throughout the day, and they appeared on everyone's group chat monitor. Rita and Ava read the lines as they appeared. They continued this way until Rita could see that Kevin was starting to yawn more often and told him that he could lay down on his bed if he wanted to. Kevin laid in his bed facing the monitors, and Charlie jumped on the bed too. Tony whistled, and Charlie got off the bed and laid in his on the floor. Kevin asked Tony how he whistled, and Rita told Kevin that he could learn in the morning. Rita and Ava continued to read out Tony's notes until they could see that Kevin was asleep. The three of them stopped what they were doing and sat and admired Kevin on their monitors. They continued to message each other on the group chat about different things they had observed throughout the day. They all agreed they had just lived through the best day of their lives.